Welcome, everyone. My name is Mitchell, and I'm your host from Canadian Geographic Education for today's presentation as a part of our 2025 Adoptership Program, sponsored by our friends at the Canadian Coast Guard. We're excited to be back for the fifth year of this amazing program that brings you behind the scenes for a deeper look at careers and educational opportunities within the Coast Guard and Fisheries and Oceans Canada. So for all of our teachers tuning in, feel free to drop a note in the chat telling us where you and your students are tuning in from today. And for all of our students in the audience, make sure to stay with us until the end, as we've got a question and answer session planned with today's presenter. So now, without further ado, I'm pleased to introduce our special guest for today, Hilary Rockwood. Hilary is a science advisor and marine biologist with the Fisheries and Oceans Canada. Hilary is joining us from beautiful St. John's, Newfoundland on the east coast of Canada. Thank you for joining us, and it's great to have you with us.
Thanks, Mitchell. Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Of course. Well, to kick things off, I'm sure we're all a little curious if you could tell us a little bit about what it means to be a science advisor and marine biologist for the Department of Fisheries and Oceans.
I love my job. It has a lot of different things that I get to do. As a science advisor, I spend a lot of time planning meetings, meeting stakeholders and scientists and coders, um, helping publish reports. And I say to people that my science advisor part of my job is like 95% email. And then the marine biologist side of the job is where I get to go out to sea and look at new organisms and work with my colleagues, measuring fish, taking samples. And that's the other 5% of my job. So I get to have kind of a cozy inside job, but also go on adventures a couple times a year.
Awesome. Well, thank you for giving that little intro. I'm sure we're going to dive quite a bit deeper into lots of other things that you're able to do as well. So the first question we had was, some of our students, I'm sure, are eager to hear about some of the unique experiences that you've enjoyed while going to school to become a marine biologist.
Yeah, I went to school all over the world. I was really lucky that I got a chance to study abroad in Australia, and I got to work on the Great Barrier Reef. But I started off high school doing science classes, and then went to the University of Santa Cruz and studied marine biology there. Santa Cruz is right on the water, so this is me at the local beach. Spent a lot of time by the water and also studying by the water, a little work, a little play. And I did my master's degree in Newfoundland at the University, Memorial University of Newfoundland, and that is actually where I'm from. This is me TAing a course at the Bombay Marine Station. This was a whale that had washed up the year before. They buried it for a year, and then we dug it up and we treated the bones, and now that skeleton is hanging up in the new science building for Memorial University of Newfoundland in St. John's. So I've done a lot of cool things. I got to go to sea while I was doing my master's degree, and this was really the first time I ever worked with fish. When I started grad school, if you had showed me a picture of a cod, I would not have been able to identify it. But through the work that I did in grad school, I got to learn a lot about fish and also being at sea and working out on the water.
Awesome. Well, I mean, those do sound like ideal places to study the ocean, and I'm sure many of the species that you've gotten to see over the years of you studying that. So, how did you know that you wanted to study marine science? Was there a certain experience that made you realize that you wanted to work with animals and learn about the ocean?
I had a major origin story moment when I was 9 years old. I went to SeaWorld. And this is before we had the documentaries like Blackfish and whatnot. But I was so excited to go to SeaWorld. I thought whales were so cool. This is going to age me, but I looked up in an encyclopedia and learned about whales before the trip. And I learned that they can see bright colors. So I wore a bright yellow tank top and I went up right up to the glass because I wanted those whales to see me and I wanted to get as close as I could. And I couldn't find the picture, but there is a picture of me up against the glass, and Shamu is coming right towards me underwater. And I think that might have been the moment where everything clicked, and I thought, okay, I think I want to be a marine biologist. So from a very early age, I was very interested.
Wow. Well, I mean, being passionate and finding something that you love to do each day is so important, and it really sounds like you found that, and especially at such a young age, is really, really nice for sure. So, can you tell us a bit about that career path that you've had so far, and what other jobs have you had that maybe helped you get the role that you have now?
Sure. After I graduated from undergrad with my bachelor's, I applied to a lot of jobs, but there was a lot of competition. I was living in California at the time, and I couldn't really find a job in my field. So that's what was one of the main motivators for me to go to grad school. And then because of the experience I received in grad school working offshore, I was able to apply for a job as a fisheries observer in British Columbia. So the picture you see here is of me taking a photo of the catch. Um, and I worked on fishing boats. So that is a really, really tough job. I was only doing that job for about 10 months before I moved on. But what you do is you go out on the fishing boats, and then every time a catch comes in, you look at the catch, you find the composition, you look at what species are there, you get an estimate of the weight, and you just help with the accuracy and reporting of what's being caught on the ocean. Because when fishing boats go out, uh, what they, like sometimes won't catch the sort of fish that they are looking to catch, or the kind of fish they have the license to catch. So a lot of fish gets thrown overboard, and those are called discards. And the only way um, that could be monitored is either with the fisheries observer, or they also use electronic monitoring programs for some types of fish. And this just helps keep track of what fish are in the ocean and what are being caught and what are being kept versus what are being thrown over the side and being returned to the ocean. It was a really tough job because uh, these fishing boats sometimes fish 24 hours a day. You don't get much sleep. There's not a lot of space. Usually, I was fed pretty well because the fishers like to eat well when they're working. But yeah, really, really tough job. So I came back from a trip, and I got a call from DFO. I don't know if I'm skipping ahead, but maybe maybe this will be a question for later, but I kind of just went straight from being a fisheries observer to working at DFO.
Awesome. Well, I guess that also kind of, showed you maybe what you didn't want to be doing 100% of the time and a part of the job that you did like. So it sounds like, even though it was a tough experience, it sounds like it helped you get where you wanted to be for sure. So that's
Yeah,
amazing.
definitely.
So, and you mentioned this a few times already, but for students who maybe love to travel or love the idea of traveling around for work or school, have you gotten? What are some of those places that you've gotten to visit for education and work? And what's the longest time you've ever worked at sea as well?
As I mentioned before, I did get the opportunity to work in Australia or study abroad in Australia. And the school that I was at there were a lot of classes where there were field trips involved. Um, so I got to do some work on the Great Barrier Reef, and I got to scuba dive on the Great Barrier Reef. And when I was in Australia, that's when I discovered my love of scuba diving, and I got to do some field work out on the Great Barrier Reef as well. I got to stay on a really tiny island at a research station, which is something that's extremely rare to do. This island takes about 15 minutes to walk around the whole thing. And the only thing on this island are a research station and a very, very, very expensive resort. So I was one of the few people who got to stay on this island and do some work there. And in this picture, I am actually going to visit two of the women in this photo later this year. So made friendships along the way as well, and they've lasted a really, really long time. I also got to go sailing. This was my longest trip, sailing through the Northwest Passages. And that was a 5-week long trip. And on the way home, we stopped in Greenland, which is a place that I never thought I'd be able to go. Um, and I'm able to, when I'm on vacation going scuba diving, really appreciate the marine life when I'm somewhere tropical, even if I'm not working.
Yeah, well, I know that some of the photos you sent are just amazing. So it's really cool how many places you've got to go, and I mean, do it for school and work is just an added bonus for sure. So. And so I'm sure a big part of your job involves surveying species that live underwater. I know you said you don't get to do it maybe as much as you used to, but what does some of that involve? And do you do surveys at the same time of year, in the same places and methods? And so just kind of when you go out to do those surveys, what do they look like?
Yeah, great question. When I mentioned this earlier, but I went straight from working as a fisheries observer to working at DFO. And when I got that call out of nowhere, they asked for someone who could go to sea. So going to sea used to be almost my full job at DFO. And we do something called the multi-species survey every year, and it happens between October and December in the fall, and between usually April to June in the spring. And we do it every year at the same time because it's a good way to look at how things are changing over time. So, a really common scientific method is to repeat things at the same time and under the same conditions, or as close to the same conditions as you can year after year. Um, because if you go out once, you'll learn a little, but if you go out over time and grow a time series, then you'll learn a lot, because what we're really looking at is not just one point in time, but what things are happening over the course of years, decades, things like that.
Yeah, that makes sense for sure. And on those different surveys that you've been on, is there a specific like favorite discovery or something that's really stood out to you as, something that you've never seen since and really just took you back? Is there a moment like that that you can think of?
A lot of times when we fish the deep water, there are some cool species that come up. Um, they're often small and black. Love an octopus when they come out. When we get an octopus, we'll throw it in water right away and we'll get it back overboard, because we don't take samples of those. We just measure them and then we get them back to the sea, because look how cute they are. But one animal that we caught at my last survey back in November was a sea lamprey, and I'd never seen a sea lamprey before. Now, I'm going to warn you, the next photo, bit of a jump scare, bit of nightmare fuel, but a sea lamprey is an early fish. It broke off from the evolutionary tree early in time, and it's what we call a jawless fish. It doesn't even have a jaw. It just has a big mouth full of teeth. It latches on to what it wants to eat, and then it sort of just takes a few munches as the fish swims along, and that's how it gets its food, because um, it can't be an active predator, no jaws, so it has to sort of just latch on. And this was the first time I'd ever seen one, and it was really cool. Something I'll definitely remember for a long time.
Yeah, it also seems like something you maybe don't want to see all the time. So maybe
I know,
that's,
Mitchell, you want to forget.
yeah, it'll take some time, but that'll be okay. Well, I mean, it just kind of shows how many amazing things that a lot of us don't even know could exist, really does exist in the ocean, and how important all these jobs and everything about learning about the ocean really is to get us to know about a part of the world that we know so little about. So, which is really important for sure. And
Mhm.
so you mentioned going from different places and really finding what you liked to do. And you've achieved a lot already in your career. And what are some goals that you maybe have for the future, and maybe some challenges that you have coming up that you're really excited to kind of take on to move forward?
Yeah, great question. In the past, I worked on a program called Citizen Cod, where I worked with high school students to collect data out on wharfs all over Newfoundland. And in that experience, I learned that I really like mentoring people. So, and, looking out for the next generation of scientists and helping inspire them and helping them get to where they need to go. So, I'm hoping over time to maybe move into a management position where I can help my employees do their best and get the best out of their jobs. I recently, in the group that I work with, we have a new employee who just started a couple months ago, and I've spent a lot of time working with her, helping her learn the ropes, and I'm really hoping to keep doing that. As far as new challenges that I'm excited to take on, we are always working towards ecosystem-based fisheries management, which is a really complicated way to look at the ocean and fisheries. And that is a constant challenge for all of us in DFO. We work together with stock assessment biologists and coders and statisticians and also uh, the fishers and the stakeholders. So it's a very difficult challenge, but something really exciting that we're trying to work towards.
Well, I mean, I'm sure there's nothing that can stop you, and I wish you nothing but the best at achieving all those things. And helping people is definitely seems like a lot of people kind of helped you along the way. So paying it back is definitely a good way to kind of move forward for sure. So, and what's for the students that are watching today, what's some good advice that you might have for students in the audience that maybe want to consider a career in marine science?
So I'll preface this by saying the only advice I can give is sort of what I think is the best and what worked for me. I know that the advice I was getting when I was a student, that was coming from boomers, and they were just like, "Oh, get a 4-year degree and you can get any job you want," and that's just not the reality anymore. But my advice is, well, I told you about my origin story when I was 9 years old at SeaWorld, but there's a lot of time passed between then and when I went off to university. So in the meantime, when I was in school, I looked at what courses I was good at, and I was getting A's in biology, and I was thinking, okay, if I'm going to do something in university and as a job, I want it to sort of come easy to me, and I want to be good at it. So usually the things that come easily to you and you do well in are things that you're interested in deep down. So I focused on when I was in high school, I focused on the classes that interested me, interest were interesting to me and came easy to me, and then that helped guide me in what I wanted to study in university, which was marine biology. But I also chose a school where if I was thinking, well, what if I start taking marine biology classes and I hate it? So I went to a school that had a lot of different options, because if you go in for one thing, there's nothing telling you you can't change to something else. So I wanted to keep my options open, but luckily, once I started studying that, it definitely reinforced that I love marine biology and I'm good at biology. So that made me feel good. And people always say network, network, and that's sort of a big word that doesn't mean a whole lot in a real way. But what you want to do is just, talk to people and get to know people, not in a formal way, but just so if an opportunity comes up, they think of you. And something I say to all my colleagues is when I'm in a room full of opportunities, I'm giving out the names of my friends because I want to root for them and I want them to do well as well. And so you want to surround yourself with people who are like that, who if there's something good going on, they're going to bring your name into the conversation. And any way you can get practical experience. You know, grades are one thing. It's good to keep your head down and get good grades, but you also want to be able to show that you know how to do things. You know, if your nose has been in a book the whole time and you've never gone outside and you've never done anything, uh, you know, that's not going to be very attractive to a future employer. So it's good to get out there and get some practical hands-on experience if you can. If your parents know anyone who works in the field that you're in or that you're interested in, then you could have your parents talk to their friends and maybe they know some opportunities for a summer job or a volunteer opportunity or something like that. But as long as you can get some hands-on experience, that's huge.
Yeah, for sure. That's kind of been a theme that we've heard from a lot of the other presenters as well, is just kind of, be personable and open to a lot of different experiences and kind of just put yourself in situations that might make you grow and learn new things for sure. So thank you very much
Yeah.
for all
Can I
that
add a
advice.
little bit to that?
Oh, for sure.
I want to just let everyone know that I didn't get my first hands-on experience in marine biology until I went to Australia, and I was almost done with university at that point. And where I got most of my experience was in grad school. So I was well into my late 20s when I was getting that really useful experience that ultimately got me hired at DFO. So, you know, there's no rush. You don't need to feel like you're behind. I know that it looks like everyone has it together and everyone is succeeding, but really, you know, you'll make it on your own time.
Yeah, for sure. Everyone has their own path for sure. Well, thank you very much for sharing all of that with us. It's all amazing things to hear about. And I think we'll get right into our question and answer period. So, any classes that are joining us from YouTube, ask any questions you have in the comments, and we'll get to them. But we do have some students in classes joining us on screen. So I think we'll start. We have a student from Division 6 who might have some questions, and then we have a student from the Navy League Cadets, and then we'll make our way to um, an Armstrong class that has joined us as well. So hello, good morning.
Hello. I just have one main question. What was one thing that when you saw the results, something that's like stumped you, like, huh, the huh moment? Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Hilary, did you get that one?
I didn't hear it on my end, unfortunately.
Um. So, have you ever gone like like a huh moment, like something didn't quite add up, and if so, what was it?
That's a great question. There are lots of those moments in science with scientists. In grad school, I was looking at the diets and spatial distributions of different types of fishes around Newfoundland, and my expectation was that everything was going to be very different, very separate. But it turns out that all the fish were pretty much eating all of the same things. So I was thinking, huh, what do I do with this? But in science, sometimes when there's no result, it's a result in itself. So really, when I was thinking, oh, all of these fish eat different things, it was sort of a bit of a discovery for me to find out, oh, they're all eating the same things. And then I had to think, okay, what does this mean? Does this mean there are less things to eat in the ocean right now? Are the things that they like to eat not around, or is there more of this thing and less of this thing? It raised a lot more questions than it answered. So it was a good learning experience because it made me think a lot more about what's going on under the water.
Okay. And another one, what are like a bunch of like some responsibilities for as being a marine biologist?
That's great too. So there's lots of different ways you can be a marine biologist. You can work in the lab, you can work in the field, you can work in front of a computer all day. And one of the biggest responsibilities is to design the research in a way that's going to answer your questions in the most accurate way. And another thing at DFO that we try to do is to be environmental stewards. And what that means is to do our work in a way that has the least impact on the environment and on the animals that are out there. So it's very important to be thoughtful when you're designing your experiment so you can get the best information and do the least amount of harm.
Okay.
Amazing. Well, thank you very much for joining us this morning and for asking such great questions.
Okay.
Thanks. All right. And now we have someone from the Navy League Cadets. Do you have a question or two that you'd like to ask Hilary?
Yeah. Why do you have to measure the fish all the time? Like you measure the fish. Why do you have measure them? Is it to see their size?
I only got the very end of your question. I'm sorry. I think there's a lag on my end. So could you repeat that?
Yeah. Why do you need to measure the fish?
That's a great question. So we measure the fish and we also weigh them. And what we do with that information is we make what's called a length weight key. So if you measure 100 fish, you can, or 1,000 or however many, you can find out what the average weight is for each length and sort of what the average length is for each weight. So if we collect all that data and then someone else, so we have the fishers go out as well and they do some surveys for us and they just measure the length. What we can do with all that length information is we can multiply it and do some math with the length weight key, and we can find out how heavy all those fish are that they're catching. And then another thing that we do, another sample that we take is we take the otoliths out of a lot of our fish. And an otolith is an ear bone. That's another name for it. And it's two bones that are on either side of the fish's head. And they actually help them with balance, kind of like our inner ear does. And but what we can learn from the otoliths is you can take a cross section and just like a tree, you count the rings. So every fish that's a bony fish, so every fish except for sharks, rays, and the jawless fish that I showed earlier, they all have otoliths. They all have a unique shape. And when they're very young, you can cut them and read them. And there's a ring for every single day that the fish is growing. And when they're older, there's a ring for every single year, just like a tree. And so then we can use that information to see, okay, if this fish is 3 years old, on average, how long is it? And then we can see, okay, are fish aging faster than they're growing, or are they growing faster than they're aging? And that can tell us a lot about the environment and the health of the ecosystem. So it may seem like we're getting a lot of random pieces of information, but they all work together to give us a better idea of what's going on.
And one more question. Have you ever caught a pufferfish?
I have never caught a pufferfish, but when I was in Australia, we were out in the tide pools and it was in low tide. And one of my classmates was looking in this one tide pool and then he scoops his hands into the tide pool and pulls up a little tiny pufferfish. It was probably only about it was very tiny and it was very cute. So I have seen a pufferfish close up in real life, but we've never caught one in Newfoundland.
And what is the type of poison that the pufferfish has in its little spikes?
I have heard of that, but I don't know off the top of my head. I think it's probably some sort of neurotoxin that freezes their prey so they can eat it, but I don't know for sure.
Like what urchins have?
Could be.
Yeah.
You'll have to look that
Thank
up because
you.
I don't know.
Amazing. Well,
Thank
thank you
you.
very much. And we do have some questions in the chat for you as well. So Logan has asked, or would love to know if you've ever seen a bobbit worm.
A
Not
bobbit
exactly
worm?
sure what a bobbit worm is, but it sounds very
I'm not familiar. You know what? I'm gonna Google it really quick and see if it's has it because a lot of fish have a lot of different names
Yeah.
depending on where you are. A bobbit worm. Oh, it's a kind of antelope. Okay, this looks very similar to what we call polychaete worms. But bobbit worms, it looks like they're in warmer water areas, but we have a similar kind of animal in the Newfoundland waters called a polychaete worm. They're quite small. A lot of different fish do eat them as, a prey item. But what's really cool about polychaete worms, and it looks like bobbit worms are the same, is that they are kind of iridescent. So when the light shines on them, it looks like a rainbow. So it looks like bobbit worms and polychaete worms are definitely related in some way. And I've seen many polychaete worms over the years. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, and a question along that line as well is, what is the weirdest animal you have ever studied?
We call the animals that we catch really, really deep. We affectionately call them the deep sea weirdos because they come up and a lot of times they're all black. They have giant eyeballs because there's no light down there, so they need to be able to pick up on the tiniest um, bit of visual cue. They have crazy mouths and teeth um, and I really love, I wouldn't call it really weird, but um, I'm sure you've heard of the lanternfish that came up to the surface recently, but the lanternfish that we mostly catch in Newfoundland are they don't look like that. They don't have the little angler, or maybe it was an anglerfish that came to the surface. But we have what's called lanternfish, and they don't have a little light that lights up on its own, but they do have these spots all over their sides that are reflective, and so that's why they're called lanternfish, because they do appear to light up since they're so reflective. And love catching those because they're really interesting. But the closest thing that I've seen in our surveys to one of those angler fish is we call it a football fish. And I think it was named that because of its shape. It kind of is shaped like a weird football, but it does have one of those dangly bits coming out of its head. And those are always really cool when we see them in the survey.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Deep Sea Weirdos is a great band name. So if anyone wants to take that. And the last question we have here is, do you have a pet fish or other marine animals at your house, or is that like taking work home?
Yeah, that would, I feel like that might separate, work and home life. I don't have a pet fish. I used to when I was younger, but there are plenty of fish tanks at DFO that I can, if I ever feel the need that I need to go visit a fish in a tank, I could do that at work. Another way that I don't mix work and home life is I don't eat a lot of seafood, which people think is really weird, but I just tell people, it's like I'm eating work, so I don't want to do that.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. Well, thank you everyone for those great questions, and thank you everyone for joining us today. And if you want to learn more about Fisheries and Oceans Canada or the Adoptaship program, just visit our website. There you'll also find a whole set of learning activities covering a wide range of Coast Guard activities and relevant skills that maybe Hilary even talked about today. So thank you, teachers and students, and thank you, Hilary. We really appreciate you joining us today and all the work that you do with DFO. So thank you, and hope to see you again. Hope to see you all again soon for our final presentation with the Commissioner of the Canadian Coast Guard. So bye for now. Bye, everyone. Thanks for joining.
Thanks, everyone.